This is the ultimate tier list for all killer Moris in Dead by Daylight. 4 years ago, I made a video like this just on which Moris I personally like the most. This time, I've created a formula to perfectly score each Mori based on different factors to find out which really are the perfect Moris and which need some serious help. Before we get into it, I make Dead by Daylight videos like these with all the latest news on the game and advice for beginners as often as I can. I also stream this and occasionally other horror games over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Earthtolydia. It'd be great to catch you in a stream sometime, but for now, let's get into the video. First of all, I've had to decide how to score these Moris. I settled on what I think are the most important categories: brutality, how well it represents the character, and how visually appealing the cinematography is. Each of these will be rated out of 5 stars, and then we'll get an average score across those categories. Next up, I had to decide how to grade each tier, and I've kept it pretty simple. A score of 0 up to 1 point is a straight up F tier. 1 to 2 will be D, 2 to 3 is C, 3 to 4 is B, 4 to 5 is A, and finally, S tier is reserved for a perfect score of 5 stars. This is a formula I have officially dubbed the Mori Scory. We're starting off weak because Trapper's Mori really is the blueprint on how not to design a Mori animation. The Mori itself consists of just a few short whacks, which would basically be the same experience of just hitting an AFK survivor multiple times. I would have loved to have seen some sort of incorporation of his bear traps into this, but apparently that was all left for Naughty Bear, who we'll see later in the video. They at some point also removed the first person aspect that used to be present on the killer's POV, but weirdly I think removing that makes it even worse, as when we had the POV of the killer and the survivor before, it made it kind of interesting to see both sides, but now you get the same lackluster experience no matter who you're playing. Cinematography also gets a flat 0 because we barely even see above the Trapper's knees in this shot. F tier. Naughty Bear's Mori is exactly what I wanted Trappers to be. The use of the bear trap is what our OG should have had all along, and for the brutality we get top marks, as does the camera work. We do lose a point from the lore friendliness though, because it just should have been Trappers. However, this is a great Mori, it's going in A tier. Wraith has the exact same problem as Trapper. The only redeeming factor is that we can actually see him in the frame. I can't quite justify it enough to give it a 1, so we gotta give him a 0.5, which leaves our overall score in F tier. Out of the original 3 killers, they didn't get them all wrong. Billy's is actually pretty okay. Don't get me wrong, it's nothing spectacular, but there's a little more than just a few quick whacks with his hammer. It is over very quickly though, and there's not an awful lot there. But unlike the other original killers, Billy ends up in D tier. Nurse has a nice little switch between third and first person, so I'm gonna give the cinematography a 3 on this. It's also not very violent, and I feel like they could have done a lot more to tie into a backstory, so she's going in C tier. Brutality for Huntress gets a 2. There's just a couple of little chops. Cinematography I can't really give more than a 1. It's a good start for the Mori team for an earlier killer, but it has to be D tier compared to others on the list. Now, Were-Elk's Mori does a lot for me. The brutality is pretty top notch with the impaling on the antlers, but I feel like it's just missing a little something to get top marks. The cinematography is really nice too. The camera shots are really well done. There's not an awful lot of lore directly associated with this skin other than it makes easy prey of its targets. Can't really argue with that on this Mori, but it doesn't feel quite as animalistic as it maybe could have been. With solid 4s across the board, this Mori's going in A tier. Hags is one of the best earlier Moris that we have in the game. This one scores high in brutality. She literally rips the carcass apart. But again, we don't really see that reflected in the character model afterwards, so it's missing out on a perfect score in this field. Lore friendliness is getting a 3. We're kind of made to feel sorry for her with her backstory, so to see her being this brutal doesn't feel quite right. Cinematography's getting a 3. The angle is nice and the tracking on the camera as well, but we only get to see the one shot. Hag goes in B tier. Doctor's brutality is going to be on the lower end due to us not really seeing much gore, but the frying of the brain is still pretty impactful. The lore friendliness on this one's going to be high in terms of method, but considering his character's meant to be sadistic and torturous, I feel like we could have had a little bit more. The cinematic feel is alright with a couple of camera switches and the close-up on the face at the end, but it does also feel like a little more could have been done, so I'm gonna go down the middle on that. Doctor gets a C. Now we're on to Freddy. This kill's straight out of Nightmare, so lore friendliness is at a 5. Brutality is gonna be ranked a bit lower as this is only one punch and it's done. Cinematography is also very good. It really does feel like it's straight from a movie. Freddy's going in B tier. Representation of Pig in her Mori unfortunately gets a 0. You would expect the Saw chapter to have some kind of a trap involved with the Mori, but unfortunately the creativity mustn't have been in the budget for this one. Cinematography and brutality both get a 1 for the the same reason. It's over so fast. There's a cut through the hand and a little slash, but that's it. And then it's over. If efficiency were a category, we'd be scoring pretty highly, but unfortunately there isn't, so we're going in F tier. As much as I love Clown's Mori, there isn't a lot in terms of gore here. We get a couple of stomps on the head, but it feels more like Houndmaster does this better. Lore friendliness is a 5 because we see the fingers added to the trophy keychain, and this does actually change the model of the survivor too. Cinematography's good, but we've seen better. B tier. Leatherface is good for an earlier release. This is pretty true for Bubba's lore, and the gore is really well done. The camera work does let this down slightly, but it is one of those where it's retained the killer's POV, so that makes it slightly more interesting, and we do get a happy little dance at the end. This one's gonna go in B tier. Another kill taken straight from the film, so lore friendliness has to be 5 out of 5. Brutality's gonna be a 3. It's definitely on the good side, and the knife does totally penetrate the survivor, but it is ultimately just one stab. Cinematography gets a 2 because there's not an awful lot to see here. Myers gets B tier. Spirits is an okay one. There's a couple of quick slashes with the weapons, so I can't rank that too high on brutality, but the cinematography is very nice with the multiple shots and the panning. Lore friendliness is also getting ranked in the middle of the road because unlike Oni, I don't really feel like we get the full rage in this one. B tier. Legions is okay. I feel like for what we know of their lore as a tearaway violent gang, we don't really see much of that in here. This feels a little reminiscent of Pig's Mori, but done better. The filming does bump this up though, as we get a kind of tug of war between the survivor and the killer, and the camera follows that. This is a firm C tier. Plagues is a Mori that I hold close to my heart. The lore friendliness is spot on. We know that she was a priestess, so the reciting of the prayer before she drowns them in vomit is a really nice touch. There's not much in the way of actual gore, but I feel like the puking makes us all cringe enough to make up for it. Camera work is kind of in the middle of the road. We have a few nice shots. Another one for the B tier. In terms of brutality, I have to give Ghostface a 1. We see more brutality from Trapper and Wraith. Ghostface just gives 3 quick stabs and the Mori's over. For the lore friendliness, it's absolutely lore friendly and sticks to what we know for Ghostface. Unfortunately, I am deducting lore points because they changed the Mori from a flip phone to a digital camera. In terms of the cinematography, it looks very good. Overall, we get an average of 2.7, which puts this one in C tier. Demogorgons is a solid Mori. We don't see an awful lot of gore, just quick head chomp with no damage to the character's model like we see in other Moris, so brutality's gonna have to get a 2. However, lore friendliness is easily maxed out at 5, and I'm gonna give the cinematic feel a 4. This gives us a 3.7 and Demo is firmly in B tier. Oni's is another really solid Mori. We've got an easy 5 out of 5 on brutality and lore friendliness, as I really feel the rage on this one. It embodies everything that this angry character represents, though I will deduct 1 point on the cinematography because I feel like a lot more could have been done in terms of camera angles. Oni gets a 4.7, which puts him in high A tier. Deathslinger really set a new bar when it came to Mori animations. His was the first one that came out that really set the standard for everything that came after. The harpoon gun is so on brand, so violent, and amazing camera work. For that, we have our first S tier Mori. Now we're onto a character that I well and truly love. Pyramid Head's Mori is very lore friendly, don't get me wrong, but it's not 100% there. The brutality's another stab and it's over, but this time with a giant sword. We also only see the one shot with this one, and I would have quite liked to have had a POV from the back of the survivor when the weapon pierced them, so he doesn't score as highly as I would personally like. Overall though, it's still good. B tier. Blight is another good one. We kind of have all the same shortcomings that Pyramid Heads has. It's not overly gory, but it is true to Blight's backstory, so I'll give him extra credit on that one. Another B tier Mori. Twins have 2 different Moris dependent on whether or not Victor is attached to Charlotte at the time of the Mori taking place, so I'm going to rank each of these independently. First up is the Mori where Victor is still attached to Charlotte. The lore friendliness is instantly at a 5 because both characters play their part, but the brutality is not that high for them. Cinematography is also slightly lacking, but in general, this is a good B tier Mori. As for Charlotte's solo Mori without Victor, I have to mark it right down. The violence does amp up a little bit more, but with everything in Twins' lore being about them sticking together, the lore friendliness in this has to get a 0. The camera work on this one is ever so slightly better, but that doesn't make up for the fact that everything's a little better with a little Victor on your chest. C tier. Trickster's Mori is brilliant. It's flamboyant, it's got great camera work, it is fairly brutal. It doesn't quite get top marks though, as I feel like a bat would have just ramped up that brutality a little bit. Extra points awarded for the blade that gets thrown up in the air at the start and then comes down at the end of the Mori though. Strong A tier. I'll be honest, I needed more from Nemesis with this one. The brutality isn't that high. We have a stomp, but again, the Houndmaster takes the cake on the stomps. The tentacle use bumps this one up in lore friendliness, but this one's another victim of lack of camera work. C tier. The Cenobites is nice, but every time I see this one, I can't help but wonder, Why isn't there more? The Cenobites and Hellraiser are all about torture, which I don't really get much from this at all. The hooks just feel like a repetition of the mechanics of the power, and we don't actually see the survivor die in this. The camera work's nice though. Another one for C tier. Artist's Mori is really good. The use of the ink from her arms implanting the crows and having them burst from the survivor feels like exactly how the character's Mori animation should have gone. This can't rank too highly on the brutality for me, as there isn't too much violence there, but it's still quite good and the camera work is also very nice. A tier. Onryo's Mori is another one where everything else is great, but the brutality only just keeps it from getting the top marks. Another one for A tier. Onryo also has a mini Mori for when a survivor gets downed when fully condemned. This one barely counts as a Mori, but it is a quick death, so we'll put it on the list. This does copy a shot from the movie, but it doesn't really feel complete from one quick glance. The different camera shots are also quite nice, but again, there's not enough of them. D tier. Dredge has a very good Mori. There's not much in terms of violence, but the little stabby knives to the back as the survivor gets dragged into the void do make me wince a little. This one does score highly on the lore friendliness though, and the atmosphere that's created by the framing is very eerie, which is exactly what's needed. Dredge goes into A tier. Wesker's Mori is very true to form, but like many others, is let down a little by the lack of violence for me. So while I can't fault the dramatic camera shots and how representative this feels of the character, I am gonna have to deduct a couple of points. Solid A tier though. Knight's Mori is so good, and I'm surprised that I don't see more Knights running Moris. The Knight gets the whole gang involved in this one, for various execution methods, which is obviously true to the character and the playstyle. The camera angles are also very well done. Knights is another Mori landing itself in S tier. Skull Merchants feels like a redo of the Freddy Mori, but weirdly risque. The kill itself is very similar, but a little bit more gory. I guess this is true to the character, but we haven't seen a drone appearance in there. I can't really fault the camera shots though. They're really solid. Skull Merchant gets a B. Singularity's a very strong contender on this list. The voice lines tie the pretty intense gore in nicely with the character's lore, so both of those get top marks. There's just something missing that takes away from full marks in the camera work, but Singularity is a very, very high A tier. The Xenomorph's Mori is fantastic. The gore's there, the kill is straight out of Alien, and the camera shots are on point. There's nothing to improve here. S tier. Chucky's Mori is so fun. We have different voice lines which all represent the character very well, and the shots are very film-like. Unfortunately, the violence isn't totally there. Again, it's more stabby and done, like we've seen from other killers, but Chucky overall is firmly in A tier. I really enjoy the framing of Unknown's Mori. It feels very film-like and gives us multiple points of view, so in that category it gets top marks. The violence is lacking on this one though. We have a couple of tentacles in the face, which is fine, but it's not top marks from me. Unknown's going in B tier. The Lich's main Mori is everything I needed it to be. The brutality is bang on, the different camera shots are also great, and it's true to Vecna. I couldn't ask for anything more from this one, and for that reason it's going in S tier. On the other hand, Lich's mini Mori on survivors holding a nat 20 item is very underwhelming. Considering this is a very situational kill animation with a very small chance of actually getting this to trigger, I wanted something a bit more. D tier. Dracula's is another phenomenal Mori. It's totally true to his regal character, and the atmosphere that the camera work gives gets top marks. We could have had slightly more brutality though, so this one's just very narrowly missing out on being on S tier. Dracula goes in A. Where the other skins fail for Dracula though, this one makes up for it. There's nothing I can fault with this. It's vicious, it's well shot, it's just all we needed it to be and makes the grind on the Rift well worth it. Another Mori with perfect marks, S tier. And finishing up, we have the newest killer, the Houndmaster. I feel like this one had a lot more potential, but for me it's not quite on par with some of the other newer Moris that we've seen. I'm knocking this one down to a 2 on lore because she's literally the Houndmaster, but the dogs play such a minimal part in this. We could have had a lot more savagery from the dogs, but they're only in it for a split second. That being said, we've got a few custom voice lines dependent on what survivor is being killed, so that's a nice touch that raises the category slightly. The head crushing is admittedly fairly brutal, but much more could have been done here. Houndmaster rounds up our list in C tier. That's the end of our tier list. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. If you want to see more Dead by Daylight videos like this one, please consider subscribing. But until next time, I'll see you in the next video.